Hi everyone. I thought I'd give you a brief intro to the second assignment to give you a sense of the things that I'd consider if I was responding to the task. Of course, the first thing I'd do is make sure that I'd read and reread the assignment, and then I'd probably read it again for good measure. The assignment asks you to identify an everyday task, choose a human factors tool or method, and apply that tool or method to analyse the task from a human factors perspective. There are some tips in the assignment brief about the kinds of things you might consider in your analysis. I realise there's lots of choices in this assessment. You get to choose the task, you get to choose the tool, and you also get to imagine who the users of the task, the equipment, the technology, the interface might be. Sometimes when there's lots of choices, it can feel a bit overwhelming. That's part of the reason I want to give you several examples to build on the ones that we've been discussing in class in our workshops. Some of these I observed on a recent trip to San Francisco. So the first example, the airport water fountain. This was an example of a piece of technology I encountered recently at San Francisco International Airport. This curious looking contraption is a water fountain, and I'll confess, at first glance, I didn't know what it was. It's interesting because it has 3 water stations, one for ambient water, one for cold water, and one for boiling water. I took a photo because I hadn't seen a design like this before, and I was curious about how people might use it. If I was using this example for an assignment like ours, I might choose task analysis to examine all the steps required to use the system and identify points where problems or confusions could arise. It's possible that a prior task analysis informed aspects of the design. For example, the bench space appears to allow greater access than when water fountains are recessed into a wall cavity. We've seen in class how task analyses can support design recommendations, such as the case study we explored on the International Space Station. You might even compare this design to more traditional water fountain designs and analyse the task flow for each. One thing I noticed that was slightly difficult was that you have to place your bottle under the fountain and then hold your hand at the side of the unit to activate the water flow. In some ways, this is helpful because people in airports often only have one free hand. However, when I used it, I found myself wanting to use both hands, one to position the bottle and one to control the water flow. The side activation mechanism is probably particularly useful for the boiling water spout, but overall, I thought there could have been clearer signage explaining what the unit was and how to use it. It relied quite heavily on intuitive use, and I didn't find it immediately intuitive. But maybe these things are all over the US. I'm not sure. The positioning of the fountain was also interesting. It was located immediately after security and quite far from the gates. I didn't see another one anywhere else in the airport. That raises questions about accessibility and usefulness. On the other hand, many people empty their bottles before going through security, so placing it immediately afterwards may be strategic. This could be a strong example of an everyday task that could be analysed using many different human factors tools. A second example, also at the airport, the wayfinding signage. Another thing I noticed at San Francisco International was the directory signage. I was looking for somewhere to eat, but I found the sign really confusing and a bit difficult to read. Part of the difficulty was the background design. It featured a crosshatch pattern with vertical and horizontal lines that appeared to relate to a broader map reference, but these lines ran through some of the text, making it harder to read. I wasn't entirely sure what the numbers along the sides referred to, whether they were part of a map grid system or something else. Imagine how this signage might affect people with impaired vision, with sensory sensitivities, with fatigue, or those in a rush, which realistically describes many airport users. This wayfinding system could be analysed using observational methods, surveys, or interviews to identify usability issues and potential improvements. While we're thinking of other tasks, I could also have used the task of riding in this very cool driverless car in San Francisco. I saw them everywhere and had to try it. I could have focused on the app that I used to book it, the task of getting into the car, which was kind of complicated because you had to unlock the door with the app while you're on the road, or the interface while you're riding in the vehicle. But of course, not everything has to be at an airport, not everything has to be in San Francisco. There are so many everyday tasks that you could choose. And if you're unsure, let's talk about it. Another note about using the literature. Whatever I chose, I'd consult relevant literature to help justify the choice of scenario and the human factors tool. The literature might also help identify evidence-based recommendations for improving the task or the equipment design. Make sure that any relevant literature from the library is appropriately referenced using the APA format. In terms of actually putting it all together, once I'd gathered my materials, completed my analysis, I'd write a script, as I've done for this video. I'd allow time to record multiple takes and leave sufficient time for editing, particularly to ensure that references are properly incorporated. I'd also review the video carefully during editing and once more before submission. There's many ways to approach this task, so please let me know if you have some questions about how you're choosing to approach it. I also hope you have some fun with this assignment, because we all tend to learn better when we're enjoying the process.